So you've started working in an human resources department and you're probably new, or probably you've been in the profession for a while and you're starting to see some things that aren't quite adding up. Could it be that you're working in an unethical human resources department? In this video, we're going to break it down. Let's go. Hey there, my name is Yannicka and I am here to help you navigate the HR space. And in this video, we're talking about ethics. You know, that thing that we're supposed to be following, like a code of ethics to make sure that the company is in compliance as well as the employees are in sync with the goals of the organization. So there are going to be times and moments that you will encounter as a human resources professional that will seem a little bit unethical and downright dirty. So I'm going to dive straight into it. Let's start with number one. The sign that you may be working in an unethical human resources department is gossip. You got it. Members of the human resources department that you're working in, or your future human resources department that you'll be working in, they have a tendency to gossip a lot, and they don't have a lot of positive things to say about their members within their existing department or anyone within the organization. And I've seen this time and time again. There's gossip going on about candidates, and they're searching their social media profiles, just nitpicking at every little thing. Or members within the organization, maybe even people within the C-suite, managerial positions, director roles, or even the CEO, they always have a little bit of something negative to say about them. And honestly, that creates a very toxic work environment for you, especially if you're not a part of that gossip. So it makes things a little bit difficult to navigate. But that's the number one sign that you're working in an unethical organization. So let's move on to number two. So number two would be retaliatory behavior. So we see a lot of times when employees come forward and they're saying that things are not in compliance. So say like safety procedures aren't being followed, or other procedures that will place the company at risk essentially, or cause some sort of injury to the staff. When those things are brought forward to management or to the human resources department, there seems to be retaliatory actions taken against that employee. So we know that there's whistleblowing acts and many protections that exist, but those things are not always practiced or followed. So we'll see times when a manager uses HR as a vessel towards, or as an instrument towards, getting employee out the door. So they begin writing them up for bogus performance issues, or they began to write them up for every little thing, every little check mark that they can create against that employee to slowly but surely skirt them out the door so they don't have to deal with a complainer anymore. So this is all retaliatory, which is highly illegal, by the way. But that's my number two, that you're dealing with an unethical human resources department. All right, so number three, we're going to talk about lack of documentation. Now, we know that a lot of departments exist, and sometimes there's processes and procedures that are undocumented. However, in the human resources profession, it's very critical for procedures to be followed and documented. And when you have a department that's not willing to document or standardize different processes, so say like if you have a process for disciplining an employee for doing XYZ sort of behavior, well, employee number one gets away with that behavior, but employee number two does not. And that means there's a whole lot of off the record things that are going on, which leads to a lot of confusion and chaos. And you want to make sure that those processes are streamlined, that every little policy every single policy is actually being implemented across the board to all employees, no exception. All right, so number 4 is untrustworthiness. Now, this honestly could have possibly been number 1, but I hear a lot about human resources not being trusted. A lot of the employees feel that if they go forward and they begin talking to a member of their HR department within their organization, that could easily put a target on their back. And honestly, this is an issue that a lot of us are fighting against. We're trying to get ethics infused into these organizations that retaliate and are untrustworthy departments. And honestly, it really needs to stop. It has to get addressed, and it all depends on the organization that you're working for. So for example, if you are a candidate and you want to ask these types of questions, it is critical that you ask these types of questions, like, how is the human resources department viewed in this organization? And the answer will be indicative of how HR is perceived overall. And if there are some issues going on that they're really not interested in addressing, then you know that potentially this HR department could be very unethical and you may need to look elsewhere for another position. Okay, so number 5 is a toxic work environment, which includes work that's being stolen, credit that's being taken, all kinds of rampant, crazy behavior going on, toxic issues that are being left unaddressed, like harassment charges, and discriminatory acts, all of that stuff that exists that is being swept underneath of the rug and no one wants to deal with it. And it actually leads me into my number 6, which is high turnover. So you don't want to work in an HR department that has high turnover. This is one of the critical questions that you should be asking during the interview process. You want to make sure that this manager, the HR manager or the director, is not just churning people in and out of the department, anyone and everyone who doesn't agree with their mindset and their little thing that they have going on within their department that they are trying to protect. High turnover is a key indicator that you're working in or about to be working in an unethical department. So that high turnover would be 6 months or less, or even 2 years or less, that people have a tendency to churn out of those roles. And the manager will have negative things to say about the person, or even false information to render against the person who did occupy that position. All right, number 7, let's talk about lack of information and a lack of regard to even render information. There's not a place for documents to be stored. There's not a place for resources to be found for the employees when they're trying to enroll in benefits, or if they need a form, if they need to file a complaint or an injury report. Basically, the HR department or members of the HR department withhold information, and they're telling you, oh, well, why don't you go figure it out for yourself? And when you go and you look for information, you can't find it anywhere because it's somewhere up in here in someone's head that you don't have access to. So this is very unethical. Come on now. We got to do better, people. If you're watching this video and your department is guilty of this behavior, please share those comments below, will you? Okay, number 8. They can't be trusted with private information. Now we know in the human resources profession, you're going to be handling a lot of personal identifiable information for your staff and for your candidates. It is so critical that you can be trusted with that information. You don't need to stalk your employees online. You don't need to look at every social media page. You don't need to drive by their house to see whether or not they're working if you're managing remote staff. You don't need to hire a private investigator to verify that the employee is at work when they should be at work, or they're married to who they said that they're married to. You need to be a trustworthy human resources person. And I see this time and time again. You'll have human resources professionals, even certified, going through employees' files, looking up information about them. Ooh, where do they live? What's that address? What type of car do they drive? Are they certified also? What's their pay grade? Honestly, that is a huge no-no when it comes to working in the human resources department. Being untrustworthy is being very unethical. All right, next up, hiring practices are crap. Okay. When I say crappy hiring practices, you're thinking, okay, it's HR. We should know how to recruit people and retain people and stuff, but you would be surprised of these issues that exist in HR and the hiring practices where they have a tendency to only hire people who agree with the agenda, or hire their buddies, their wives, their buddies' wives, and only people who they are familiar with. They lack diversity. They don't care about bringing anyone else into that department aside from who they are familiar with and people within their inner circle. They use crazy little tactics as far as skewing the numbers and saying, oh yeah, well, we tried to hire diverse people, but we couldn't find anybody. So I guess we just give up on our diversity initiatives. This is unethical. Come on now. The hiring practices should be a lot better than that, especially coming from the Human Resources Department. So be on the lookout for that type of behavior. All right, last but not least on this list is, they have already been sued. So if you're working in a company or a human resources department, they are not exempt from being sued personally or having the department sued as well. This does exist. We have seen many cases where the Human Resources Department or members of the Human Resources Department have been sued for being unethical and for participating in activities and little initiatives that the company had going on, or maybe on their own accord, they decided to do some shady stuff and actually ended up in jail. So you want to ask yourself before you participate in unethical behavior, is it really worth going to jail over? And probably not. So that wraps it up for me in this video when we talk about unethical behavior. So I would love to hear your stories. What are some of the unethical behaviors that you have experienced throughout your career? I would love to hear from you. Leave your comments below. And I hope that you have enjoyed this video. If you like what you've heard, click subscribe and I will see you in the next video.